Hello, my friend. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today, to spend a few moments with us. I want you to know I'm praying for you. I really am. I'm praying that our time together will be life impacting and life changing, not because of anything that I'm going to say, but because together we will encounter the living God through His Word. I pray that God will meet you today at the point of your need, that He'll do in you and through you and for you what you cannot do for yourself. And I thank you. I thank you that you have taken the time to spend a few moments with us. Take your Bible, if you would, and turn with me to the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to read verse 10. Genesis chapter 12, and we're reading verse 10. Follow along as we read. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. So, based on our text, due to this severe famine that had swept across the land of Canaan, where God had appointed Abraham to be, Abraham kept drifting south until he entered into Egypt. He exited the promised land. He entered into Egypt. But here's the deal. God did not tell Abraham to go down to Egypt to escape the famine in Canaan. That was Abraham's idea. That was his decision. It was not God's decision. It was Abraham's and Abraham's alone. You know, it appears that Abraham was worried that God would not provide for him in the land of Canaan, where God had appointed him. Apparently, Abraham was worried about his provision. So he took matters into his own hands, and he obviously didn't consult God. He didn't seek the Lord on the matter. He just decided to go down to Egypt to provide for himself and for his family, and he did it. He assumed it would be okay with God. Now listen, here's a life principle for us to learn. It's far better to face a famine in the place where God has appointed you than to go somewhere where He did not send you. You know, one of the lessons that we learn from Abraham's story is to do what God tells you to do and then wait patiently on Him for His next instruction to you. Don't take matters into your own hands. Don't try to solve your own problems in your own strength and in your own resources. Learn to move only when He says move. And until He does, be still. Rest in Him. Wait on Him for His intervention, His provision. You know, we're better off. It's not easy to do, but we're better off. We're better off staying in a place with limited resources than to go somewhere without God's guidance. Let me say that again. We're better off to stay in a place with limited resources than to go somewhere without the Lord's guidance. And waiting on the Lord, it's not an easy discipline to master. You know that from experience. I know it's not a strong suit for any of us. Waiting on the Lord is a difficult discipline to master, but it's the wisest and the safest thing we can do. In walking in God's will, the wisest thing we can do is learn to wait on the Lord for His instruction. Now, while in Egypt, Abraham found that not only could he provide for himself and for his family, but my goodness, he prospered. He enriched himself, but not without a cost. Not without a cost. See, while he was in Egypt, because of decisions that he made, he found himself in deep trouble. He found himself in deep trouble. When he arrived in Egypt, he had instructed to tell Sarah, his wife, just tell the Egyptians you're my sister, because if you don't, they're going to find out I'm your husband, and they'll kill me to get me out of the way because you're a beautiful woman, and they're going to want you to be introduced to Pharaoh, to be added to his harem. And so just tell him you're my sister, and it'll go well with you, and it'll go well with me. And so in order to protect his own life, he put this lie out and asked Sarah to be in cahoots with that lie. And in doing so, it's going to put her at great, great risk. Understand, the culture in Abraham's time was, they had a different attitude towards women than we have here today. Women in that day and time were little more than property to be done with as it pleased their husbands. Whatever the husband wanted to do, she's just property. She doesn't have a will of her own that she can exercise. And you know, when Abraham said, tell him you're my sister, it was a lie. No mistake, it was a lie. But it was partly true because Sarah was Abraham's half sister. So he tells kind of a half a lie, but half a lie is a whole lie, right? In Scripture. It doesn't change the fact. It doesn't change the fact that God had called Abraham to be a model of someone who lives God's ways, to be a model of God's ways. He was to live a different life by different rules, by different value points than any of those people that were around him, those of the culture that was around him. God was calling Abraham to be a prototype for how a man was to treat a woman. He was to be the prototype for it, but he failed miserably. So he told Sarah, here's what you do. You tell him, I'm your brother. It's going to spare my life. It's recorded in Genesis 12, 14 through 16. Listen. And so it was, when Abraham came into Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh treated Abraham well for her sake. He had sheep and oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. Abraham's plan is working. It's working. The Egyptians spared his life, and they were treating him very well because they did not know that he was Sarah's husband. He was a brother. No need to kill him. But God did not give this plan to Abraham to provide for himself and to prosper. This wasn't God's plan. And Abraham's plan, as you know, put Sarah's virtue at severe risk. Pharaoh had added her to his harem. She was in line to spend the night with the king. It put her virtue at severe risk. And God got involved. God got involved in his mercy. God responded by bringing judgment upon the Egyptians, beginning with Pharaoh's house. Genesis 12:17. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Now, God had previously told Abraham that he would make him a blessing to the nations. He would be a blessing to the nations. But because of Abraham's lie to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's house is now suffering the judgment of God. Abraham's not a blessing. God said, I'm going to make you a blessing. But Abraham, in this case, because he lied, he's not a blessing. He was the root cause of God's judgment on Pharaoh. Understand, when we operate within the will of God, it's natural for God's blessings to overflow out of us onto others that are around us. And when we operate outside of God's will, the reverse takes place. God's blessings will dry up, leaving barrenness in its place. And we become a dry well. We're dry, we're empty, a dry well, and a source of delusionment and disappointment to those connected to us. It wasn't supposed to be this way. If you're walking in God's will, the blessings of God are supposed to be upon you and flow from you, and it's not. It's not. So, like Abraham, my friend, listen, God intends for us to be a blessing and a source of encouragement to others that are around us, those in our sphere of influence, those who are connected to us. Listen, Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3 says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night." Listen, "He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper." Understand, my friend, listen, realize the fruit that's mentioned in this passage of Scripture is not produced for the benefit of the tree. The fruit that grows on the tree is not for the benefit of the tree. The fruit in this passage is produced to bless the people who pass by the tree. They're to take of the fruit and be blessed, right? So walking outside of God's will always make us spiritually unable to be a blessing to others. You get outside of God's will, I promise you, you will not be a blessing, at least not like God intended you to be a blessing to those that are around you and connected to you, that you come into contact with. We may look and sound good on the outside. I mean, it may look like we've got our act together and that God is just blessing and enriching us, but we're spiritually barren on the inside if we're outside of God's will. And understand this, when we look at Abraham's story, problems do not prove that you are out of the will of God. Problems don't prove that you're outside of the will of God. The proof you're out of the will of God is your spiritual barrenness. There's no spiritual fruit in your life. That's proof that you're outside of God's will. And then the opposite is also true. Blessings do not prove that you're in the will of God. Just because the blessings are there doesn't prove that you're in the will of God. The proof that you're in the will of God is that your life is bearing spiritual fruit. You're fruitful spiritually. You know, when you're faced with adversity, the temptation is great, but don't try to solve your problems on your own without God. You've never been successful doing it yet. We need to stop trying to be able to solve our own problems without God. That day will never come for us. Stay in the place where God has planted you. Stay put, and the fruit of his blessings will naturally come in time. Pray and believe the promises of God's word, and then wait on the Lord. Stay put. Don't get restless. Don't try to move on and solve your own problems. And if you'll wait on the Lord to solve your problems, I promise you, he's going to make you a blessing to those whom you come in contact with, to those in your sphere of influence, to those who are connected to you and to your life. Listen to Zechariah chapter 8 and verse 13. It says, "It shall come to pass that just as you were a curse among the nations," listen, "O house of Judah and house of Israel, I will save you, and you shall be a blessing." You shall be a blessing. That's God's intention for all of us, is to be in the center of his will, to be where he wants us to be totally and openly dependent upon him for all things. Not to give him a percentage of our life, but give him the whole of our life, and then walk in obedience to his word and to his ways. And the fruit of that will be, he will make us a blessing to everyone around us. The Apostle Paul knew that because he was pursuing God's will, he would be a blessing to other people. Listen, Romans chapter 15 and verse 29. "But I know," listen to this, "but I know that when I come to you, I shall come in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ." How could he be so confident? How could he be so confident that he was going to be a blessing to other people? Because Paul knew that he was dependent on God for everything. Paul knew that if he was outside of God's will, he would not be a blessing. But he was confident, based on his conviction of Scripture, that if he was walking in God's will, trusting the Lord to guide him and dependent upon the Lord for everything in his life, he was confident that he would be a blessing to anyone that he encountered. And it's true for us. See, when we're walking in God's will for our life will impact others that are around us. There's going to be this outflow of Christ's life and his overflow of his life that are going to touch the people around us and be a blessing to them because we're walking in his will, because we're seeking his guidance on a daily basis, because we're openly dependent upon him for everything in our life. Every need that we have, we're totally dependent upon him. Listen, the key to remaining in God's will is going to hinge on two things. It hinges on two things. Number one, discipline ourselves to wait where the Lord tells us to wait. That's hard. That's hard. Sometimes we're confident we know where we're supposed to be with God, but nothing's happening. It's just quiet. Everything is still. There's no movement. There's no we can't see any fruit of the result of our being obedient to God. But listen, it hinges, if we're going to stay in God's will, it hinges on us disciplining ourselves to wait where God tells us to wait. Wait where God tells us to wait. And then disciplining ourselves not to move forward until the Lord tells us to move forward. Many years ago, my wife and I, we moved our family from Southern California. We moved to Kansas. We believed with all of our heart at the time that it was God's will for us to move to Kansas. But we were not sure what God wanted us to do once we got there. We just knew he told us to go. And we did. We packed everything up. We moved to Kansas. We rented a home and got our girls settled into school. And we started what would be one long year of inactivity, waiting. It's not that we weren't trying to find expressions for ministry or outlets for ministry. They just were very few and far between. I contacted all of my college roommates that were pastors and friends that were pastors and tried to get them to invite us to come, and nobody did. Nobody did. For 1 year, my wife and I waited on the Lord. And I got to tell you, we didn't do so well. We didn't wait with great patience. It was so hard. But it was a discipline that God needed to bring into our life because of what he had planned for us later in our ministry. So 1 year we waited on the Lord, and then an invitation came. And through that invitation, God spoke to us. And we are where we are today because we had waited where God told us to wait. So discipline ourselves. If we're going to walk in God's will, we're going to have to discipline ourselves in two things. Remember, we're going to have to discipline ourselves to wait where God tells us to wait. Be still and wait. And then we're going to have to discipline ourselves not to move ahead until God tells us to move forward. My friend, listen, just because you find yourself in a difficult circumstance, listen carefully, it doesn't mean that you're out of God's will. Just because you're in a difficult circumstance, it doesn't mean that you're outside of God's will for your life. Actually, the opposite is true. Just because things are going well, it doesn't mean that you're inside of God's will. Abraham's proof of that. Things went very well for him while he was in Egypt. He prospered. He prospered, big time prospered, but it wasn't God who was prospering him. Abraham was out of God's will because he left Canaan to seek provision for himself on his own. He went to Egypt on his own. And his prosperity, it was big. It was great inside of Egypt, but it wasn't God. It wasn't the hand of the Lord that was prospering him. Because Abraham was outside of God's will while he was in Egypt, Sarah and Pharaoh's household paid a price. Sarah and Pharaoh's household paid a price. My friend, listen, on the surface, when you look at this story, it doesn't seem fair for God to punish Pharaoh because of Abraham's sin. It doesn't. When you look at it, Pharaoh was operating in his integrity. He told me he was her brother, and he acted on that information. And on the surface, it just doesn't seem fair that God would punish Pharaoh for Abraham's sin. But here's something else it's a life lesson. We need to catch this. We don't know enough about God and his dealings with men to criticize his decisions. We don't have enough back information to criticize God for punishing Pharaoh for what appears to be a thing that he entered into based on information given to him by Abraham. It is safe to assume, there are other things at play between God and Pharaoh, and the culmination was that God brought judgment on Pharaoh's house. And as the text shows, it was a result of Abraham's lie. Listen to Romans chapter 9, verse 20 and 21. But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God? Wow. Listen to that again. Indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God? Will the things formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have the power over the clay? From the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor. Who are you to reply against God? I think it'd be wise, my friend, I know it will be, if we assume there are more things at play than we understand. So don't criticize God for what appears to be an injustice on his part. Leave it alone. Just assume there's more than you know. And there is, right? Job learned this lesson the hard way, didn't he? God challenged him with 75 questions. He challenged him for his criticism of God. Job 38, 1 through 3. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you and you must answer them. And it goes on. Job 40, verse 1 and 2. Then the Lord said to Job, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have the answers? Are you qualified to criticize me? That's what God was asking Job. That's what Paul was stating to the church at Rome. Who are you to reply against God? You're not qualified. None of us are. Listen, my friend, learn this. We're not wise enough to be God's counselor or to be his critic. We're just not. We're not wise enough to be his counselor or his critic. It's our responsibility to seek out and follow his will and then let God be God. Trust him. Even if we don't understand, trust him. I encourage you, sink your roots. Sink your roots into that place where God has planted you and draw on that life-giving resource that he'll bring through Christ into your life. And the fruit of your obedience, it will come just as he promised. It'll come just as if you put your roots down where God has appointed you to be, and you wait on the Lord for his guidance, and you're dependent as a child is upon a parent. You're dependent upon him for everything in your life. The fruit will come in God's due season, I promise. You know, the reason God plagued Pharaoh's household, part of the reason was to get Abraham out of the mess he had created for himself. God, through his grace, delivered Abraham in spite of his self-inflicted problems. He shot himself in the foot and then he limped. But God delivered him out of his mercy and grace. God did not deal with Abraham in his anger and his judgment. He could have, but he didn't. He didn't deal with Abraham in his anger and his judgment. He dealt with Abraham in such a way that it redirected Abraham's steps to walk again in God's will for his life. God redirected Abraham to return to Bethel, to the place where he had heard it first. This is where I've appointed you. This is the place. And so Abraham did. He returned to Bethel, and he returned to the altar that he had built there, that place of the beginning. Genesis 13:3-4 says he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abraham called on the name of the Lord. My friend, today, you may be facing a very difficult circumstance. And sometimes we can't understand and we can't discern why the Lord is allowing these things to happen in our lives. Why, God, why? Why are you allowing that? We're wise enough to know He's not the author of our misery, but we're wondering, why in the world are you allowing this to happen? It very well may be that God's allowing this to be a test for you, to use this to build your faith and maybe redirect your steps, strengthen your faith and redirect your steps. And Satan is going to use your problem to steal your peace, to destroy your hope, and to erode your confidence in God. That's how he will use it. God will use the test. He'll use your problem to build your faith and redirect your steps. Satan wants to use the problem to destroy you. And then, let's be honest, your problem may be the fruit of your own mistakes, your own bad decisions, and your failure to stay in God's will. But that doesn't mean that God's going to wash his hands of you and that he'll be done with you. It doesn't mean that. Regardless of the reasons of your problem, don't look for your own answers. Don't try to find your own solutions. Don't be like Abraham and run down to Egypt to meet your needs. Don't make your own plans and defensive schemes to face your fears. You will find what you need to find, what you're looking for, when you humble yourself before the Lord and seek his guidance, to seek his provision, to seek his will, and then wait for God to give you instructions. Stand still before him and wait to see his salvation, just like the children of Israel did with Moses at the Red Sea. Wait on the Lord to show his deliverance. And then I promise you, when we're fully committed to his will, he'll never permit us to remain in confusion. I love the first few words of chapter 13 of Genesis, verse 1. It says, "Then Abraham went up from Egypt." You know, Egypt is considered throughout Scripture as a symbol for sin, a world spirit. It's figurative of our old life. And Abraham had left his sin behind, and he moved back to that land of Canaan, and where he would be restored to God's will. And there's an amazing paradox in how this episode of Abraham's journey of faith ends. Notice, even though he was out of God's will when he was in Egypt, God allowed him to keep the wealth that he gained while he was in Egypt. My friend, listen, point being, even in our defeats, even our blindness and our disobedience, God showers us with his grace, his mercy, and his blessings, and he redeems the mistakes that we made. Did Abraham know better? Did he know better? Was he in a rebellious frame of mind when he journeyed down to Egypt? Was he trying to get back at God? I don't believe so. And the scripture doesn't say one way or the other. What we do see is a man that could have saved himself a great deal of trouble if he would have just sought the Lord for, what do you want me to do now? Famine is in the land. How do I provide for myself and my family? And for whatever reason, Abraham didn't consult the Lord. But understand, God redeemed him. His grace is wider. It's deeper than any of our mistakes. One decision will bring you back into the center of God's will. One prayer will restore you to what God has purposed for your life. Let me pray for you. My Father, I come to you in Jesus' name. I bring my friends with me. I thank you for our time together, and I thank you for your presence. I thank you for being with us. Father, I pray for those of us who have stepped outside of your will, taken matters into our own hands, tried to fix our problems our way with our own resources, and we have failed every time. Father, I pray today will be the day when you touch our hearts. Restore us to that path to walk yet again in your will. God, thank you that your grace is wider and deeper than our mistakes. Meet my friend at the point of their need. Do for them and in them and through them what they cannot do for themselves. And I thank you for it. I offer you my prayer in the name that's above every name known to the ear of any man, the name of Jesus. Amen and amen. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you for listening to this week's message. To stay up to date, please like us on Facebook at Touching Africa Ministries or visit our website at touchingafricaministries.org. If you would like to give online, head to touchingafricaministries.org/donate.